Hello, my name's Paul Mercer, and I'm going to read you a short story that I wrote myself called Scotland. Scotland, the land of my birth and upbringing. Whilst reading an article in the newspaper this morning, suddenly and without warning, my thoughts turned back through many years in a flash. Why did I suddenly think of Scotland? And specifically turn back to my early teenage years? Could it have been fond memories flooding back? Some longing to return, perhaps? No. What had sparked this moment? I have no idea, but it made me think about those days. My early teenage years were nothing to shout about. In fact, being 13 or 14 years old are not necessarily memories to cherish. Perhaps you're the same. I've no immediate family left in Scotland now. They have all long since either sadly departed or flown to various other parts of the world and settled there. And here I am living in Spain. I no longer seem to have any great affinity to Scotland, though I'm still very proud of my heritage. And as you can tell, I've never lost my accent. I left Scotland so far back, there are no close friends living there anymore either. All have faded away over the years. It all has to do with my having worked and lived overseas in different countries around the world. But I have to say, in all the time I've been away from Scotland, I have never once felt homesick. But please don't misunderstand me. There are no bad feelings on my part towards Scotland at all. It's just that I don't miss it. In fact, my last visit to the home country was in 1999, staying with friends living in Moneyfeith at the time. Moneyfeith, for those of you who don't know, is the small town next door to Carnoustie on the mouth of the River Tay. This is why I remember the year so well. For golfers amongst us, or those who watch the Open Championship on TV, that was the year Frenchman Jean van der Velde threw away the Open Championship lead on the 18th hole at Carnoustie. Having hit his ball into the burn which runs alongside the fairway, he decided not to lift it out of the water and take a drop shot. Instead, rolling up his trousers and taking off his golf shoes and socks, he waded into the burn to play his ball as it lay amongst the stones at the bottom of the shallow water. That did not work out well for him. I remember the incident like yesterday. What possessed the man? Anyway, I digress. That was 21 years ago now. So what suddenly jerked my thoughts back to Scotland? During this period of isolation, there's no golf to watch on TV, so it can't have been that which jogged the memory. Neither were there any TV programs at the time about Scotland. Weird. Could it have been the relentless rain that fell on Catalonia for 3.5 days solid in mid-April this year? That was really depressing. During this time of isolation, you don't need that. Possibly. Rain is something I recall very well growing up. We played sport in the rain, we watched sport in the rain, we cycled in the rain, and if meeting friends, we just went out in the rain. Thinking back to going out in the rain as a youngster, it used to infuriate me that when arranging to meet at a cafe with a crowd of friends, all the boys arrived soaked to the skin, having walked from home. Yet the girls arrived dry, having always been driven there, then taken home again later by one or other of their parents. Did these parents ever offer any of us boys a lift home? No, they did not. And there was absolutely no way my mum or dad would dream of getting the car out of the garage just to drive me to a cafe in town. I was a boy. Anyway, Who amongst us boys knew what time to ask their parents to collect you again anyway? It would have been so embarrassing if you arranged for them to come too early, or feeling really stupid if you're left sitting alone in the cafe after everybody had long left, because you'd asked them to come too late. We only knew the answer to what time was appropriate when, after the girls with prearranged pickup times started disappearing one by one. But then, as soon as the last one had gone, there followed some serious discussion amongst us boys about all the things talked about that evening. What had been said by who seems to fancy whom, and other such important issues. No one ever wanted to be the first to leave. But being soaked through became such a common event, we ceased to think about it after a time. It came with the territory. All a part of growing up. Arriving home from school in a downpour, from a party or a sporting event, meant you were regularly often cold, wet, and miserable. Although it has to be said, if you're going to a party at somebody's house in town and arriving sopping wet in your best togs, you never really impressed the girl you most wanted to impress either. But you always had to try to look your best. You at least left home dry, dressed in your best shirt, trousers, shoes and jacket. But arriving at the party with wet hair, soggy shoes and socks, a ruined sweater or jacket just didn't turn the girls on. And as you all know, a wet sweater doesn't smell too good either as it dries out. I've got a good Swedish friend who's told me on more than one occasion there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothing. Well, he's right, of course. Scandinavians seem to have always been able to get sensible clothing easily. Perhaps I could have too, if we'd ever gone shopping at one of the big stores in Edinburgh or Glasgow. All I ever seem to remember shops selling at the time were things like hiking clothes, fishing jackets, sailing jackets, and so on. Nothing remotely stylish. Anyway, I suspect that if everyone had been able to find and afford decent-looking proper rainproof clothes back then, we wouldn't have kept getting soaked. But there were just not the economical choices of top-class weatherproof clothing available, or there were no shops to buy them where I lived. Maybe quality all-weather gear hadn't been successfully mass-produced back then. I don't know. Just imagine arriving at a party, not in your best clothes, but wearing welly boots, oilskin trousers, a captain's bird's eye jacket and a sou'wester. That would most definitely have been uncool and caused a great deal of hilarity amongst others. Similarly, attending a football or rugby match wearing a pack-a-mac. You remember those? That was considered girly. Just get wet and live with it. That was the order of the day. Golf was the worst as a teenager. We weren't unduly stupid, myself and partner. If it was raining before we started and the radio forecast was for rain all day, we just didn't play. But when you're out there, at the furthest point on the golf course from the clubhouse when the heavens open, what do? You play on, of course. Neither of us would have dreamt of just walking back in, or would ever even have suggested such a thing, because to walk back in would have been non-macho and wimpy. All I remember is I didn't have any good rainproof gear at the time, and neither did any of my friends. And in my case, on the golf course, just a very old umbrella which blew inside out every now and then. It's different now. I'll race my playing partners back to the clubhouse as soon as the weather turns nasty. Game abandoned. Nowadays, we're spoilt for choice on suitable weatherproof sports clothing, and we have a telephone that will warn you not to start out on the golf course because it's going to pour with rain halfway around. Yet, no one I knew growing up ever got pneumonia. Remarkable. I think the only thing they ever caught was a telling off from their mothers when they came home soaked, especially if they had a Pack-A-Mac in their pockets. But no, it can't have been the rain that took me back in time suddenly. People throughout the UK can relate to what I just told you. Scotland was by no means uniquely affected by rain because no matter which part of the UK or Ireland you originate from, some of the above must ring true. So what has prompted these thought processes about Scotland? Could it have been the sounds of a lone piper playing in the distance on the hills of Cabaños? Or perhaps the sound of a rutting stag in the forest opposite? Maybe even imagining the salmon or trout leaping in the river below our houses. Stupid. Now I've become completely fanciful and must be hallucinating. What absolute rubbish. Sorry about that. In short, I have no idea what caused this strange situation. Does any one of us seriously want to reminisce about their 13 to 14-year-old teenage years? I don't. I think I'll get back to reading the newspaper and forget about this bizarre episode in my life. Got it! Got it at last! In the paper today, above the article I was reading, is a photograph of someone going shopping in Scotland. And the shop they're going into has a big sign above the door saying, Arbroath Smokies. Now, whilst I'm sure I must have eaten Arbroath Smokies at some stage over the past many years, it used to be a regular on our dinner table as a young teenager. When did that change? And when did my mother stop buying them? Did they become too expensive? I've no idea. But suddenly, I have this urge to have one. But I can't, can I? Oh, I can taste one now. Is it worth another trip to Scotland to get the real thing? Perhaps. Or perhaps not. Anyway, problem solved.